Hey everyone, welcome to my new tutorial. Today we are going to create this cute little flower because it's springtime, but we'll give it a little bit of the nerdy twist as always, because that's the one from the Mario games, you know, the fire flower. So I really hope you will enjoy this one. And for those of you who are already a little bit familiar with my tutorials but want to learn more advanced stuff, you know, those realistic and semi-realistic techniques I use in my process videos every week, I've made the new course and I will guide you through all of that, you know, advanced modeling, texturing, lighting, even tree creation from scratch and some ideation and research phases. So if you're interested, go check it out. It's more than 9 hours of content. That's why obviously it's not on YouTube. You will find the link in the description and find all the necessary information on my website homepage. So let's now jump right into empty Blender file, and first of all let's delete the cube and the light here. We'll leave the camera in place, so let's press X and delete. And now let's press Shift A and we'll add a circle. And now let's go here and modify the vertices to 24. We don't need that much. And now tap into the edit mode, press F to fill and E to extrude. And now let's press Shift D to duplicate this, right click to release and press S to scale it up. We'll sandwich two of those over each other, so let's press E again to extrude. And now let's press A to select all and Shift N to recalculate normals in case they were messed up. And now press 3 for face select, select the top face, hold Shift S and snap cursor to select it. And now let's tab out, and now we'll need the extra objects add-on. So if you go edit, preferences and add-ons and search for extra, you will find there's add mesh extra object. Just check the box, close the preferences, and now if you press Shift A and go mesh, you will see all of these options right here, including the single vert, which we are going to use right now. So let's add one, and make sure you are in the vertex select mode right here. So press 1 for vertex select, and let's press 3 for a side view, and we'll extrude the flower. So press E, then Z, and extrude this up. And now we can hold Control, and just by right clicking we can continue the extrusion and create a shape like this, you know, a little curve right there. And now let's rotate, tab out, right click, and let's convert to curve. Now in the curve settings we'll scroll down, and in the geometry section we'll increase the depth like this and reduce the resolution to 2. We'll subdivide this later anyway. And now we can tab into the edit mode, and you can see these are now curve control points. So select the top one, hold Shift S and snap cursor to select it. Now tab out, and let's press Shift A and we'll add another circle like this. And we can modify this even lower, something like 12. We'll use the subdivision there. And now let's define the width. So let's look from the top, and I want this approximately the same as the base, so something like this in the edit mode. And now we can tab out, right click and convert to curve again, and in the geometry section increase the bevel and reduce the resolution to 2. So this will be the outer ring. So let's look from the top again, tab into the edit mode, and we can press S then Y and scale it on Y axis because I want this to be elliptic a little bit like this. And now let's press Shift D and S to scale this inside, but you can see the radius stays the same because that's controlled by the depth right here. So this is what I want to have right here, but now I can see the depth is too large because there's not much empty room there. So let's reduce the depth a little bit and scale this up some more. And we can additionally press S then Y and scale this on Y axis as well. And maybe let's select all and make it a little bit larger. And now let's tab out and let's press Ctrl 2 to add subdivision surface. That will create some of the gaps so we can refine the depth right here, so it touches here a little bit. And now since we have the cursor still in the middle, let's press Shift A and we'll add a cube. Tab into the edit mode, press S to scale it down like this, and then S and X to scale it on X axis. Look from the side, and then S then Z to scale it like that. And we can tab out and press Ctrl 1 to add subdivision modifier, but we'll apply that immediately. So let's go here in the modifiers panel and click apply here. And now we can press tab into the edit mode, scale it up, tab out and press Ctrl 2 to add another subdivision modifier, now with that new shape. And again we'll scale it up a little bit. So tab into the edit mode and press S until it touches. Okay, so that's about the modeling of the flower. Now we'll need some leaves. So let's hold Shift S and snap cursor to world origin. Let's press Shift A and we'll add a plane. Now press G then X and move it to the side. Tap into the edit mode, press S then X and scale it like this. Now press Ctrl R and create two cuts just like that. Let's look from the top by pressing 7 on a numpad. Let's select the top verts, press S and scale it down, and same here. And now we can look from the side. Let's enable X-ray view right here, select all of this in the middle, press G then Z and move it up. And now we can press A to select all and press Alt E and extrude faces along normals to create an extrusion like this. And now we can press 3 for face select, select the top one and move it a little bit higher, so we have some more volume right here. And now we can press Ctrl R and create a cut right here in the middle and select the top edge and press Ctrl B to bevel and increase the number of cuts with the mouse wheel, so we have something like this here. Now let's go here and enable auto merge. That will merge the vertices that are connected. So let's press 1 for vertex select, select this one on the side, press G twice to slide it and slide it all the way here, and it will auto merge just like that. And now back to the edge select by pressing 2, select the top edge, press G then Z and move it down to create a ridge like this. And now we can disable the auto merge, disable the X-ray, tab out and press Ctrl 2 to add subdivision modifier, and here we have a shape like this. So we can look from the side, tab into the edit mode, press A to select all and move it right here and rotate it a little bit using R, so we have it aligned with the y-axis. So now we can tab out, press G then Z, move it up, R then Z and 90 degrees minus to rotate 90 degrees. And let's look from the front by pressing 1 on a numpad, press G, then X, move it here, a little bit lower, and now press R to rotate. And now R and Y twice to rotate around the local y-axis, and let's enter 45 degrees. So it's looking this way, and now we can just add a mirror modifier right here and use the eyedropper and choose the base as the mirroring object. And now let's finish with the eyes on top. So let's press 7 on a numpad, Shift right click here to move the cursor. Let's press Shift A and we'll add a cube, tap into the edit mode and press S to scale it down, and then S then Y to scale it on y-axis. And let's create 2 loop cuts, so Ctrl R and increase the number of cuts with the mouse wheel, right click to release in place. And now let's look from the side. We'll need to adjust the shape a little bit, so again we'll need to enable X-ray. Let's select these edges on the side, hold Shift and select the other ones, press G then Z and move it down like this. Now we can tab out and press Ctrl 2 to add that subdivision modifier here as well. Let's look from the top and we'll add that mirror modifier here, and again use the eyedropper with this object right here as the center for mirroring. And let's disable the X-ray, press G then X and move it closer a little bit. Now we can adjust, the position of these. And now let's hold Shift, select the outer rings, and now the middle part as last, press Ctrl P and parent the object. So now we can just select this one here, press R then X and rotate it. And now we have almost all of this nice and smooth except the bottom base. So let's select it and let's in the modifiers panel add the bevel modifier, increase the number of segments to 2, and we can play with the amount here. But now we can press Ctrl 1 to add that subdivision modifier here as well, so we have a little bit more dense mesh. And now let's deal with this part right here. So first of all, right click and convert back to mesh. So we have this low poly mesh right here, and now we can press Ctrl 2 to add that subdivision modifier here as well. And basically we'll need to convert this as well, but I want the same low poly mesh here, so let's remove the subdivision first. Let's convert this to mesh, and now let's press Ctrl 2 to add that subdivision back again. So now all of these objects should be mesh and we should be able to connect them together. So first of all, let's apply those mirror modifiers. Let's move it on top here and apply, and same here. And you will see why I'm doing this in a second. Let's just apply the bevel modifier here as well. And now we only have the same subdivision modifier on all of those, so we are now ready to add yet another modifier. So first of all, let's select everything, right click and shade smooth. And then let's hold Shift S, snap cursor to world origin, and let's press Shift A, and we'll add a lattice object right here. Let's look from the front, press G then Z and move it to the middle of the flower. And now we can scale it up like this, and press S then Z to scale it on Z axis as well. Let's refine the position, and I think something like this should work. And now in the lattice options, we'll increase the W twice, so we have 2 slices there, and we'll use this lattice object to animate using shape keys right here. But first we need to add the lattice modifier to all of our objects. So select the base, and let's go to the modifiers panel, and let's add the lattice modifier, and we'll pick the lattice object with the eyedropper tool. And now let's just select everything else here by holding Shift and dragging the selection, and now hold Control and deselect the lattice. So everything should be this orange and the base should be yellow as active. And now let's click here and copy to select it. So now every object have the same lattice modifier, but not everything is parented yet if you try to move the base. So let's select the middle part of the flower and the leaves and parent everything to the base here. So Control P and parent object. So this part is parented separately, and then we have everything else parented to the base, and every object has the lattice modifier. So if you go into the edit mode and move the lattice around, you can deform the flower like this, which is very handy when you need to do a simple like a jumping animation or something like that. So, and that's exactly what we are going to do now, a little bit idle animation with the flower jumping and tilting from side to side. So let's look from the front, and let's expand the timeline here a little bit, and let's modify the length of the animation to something like 60, and in the output settings let's set this to 30 FPS, and we'll go in increments of 10 frames because I want this to be a little bit faster and more dynamic. So this will be our basic shape key. Let's go to the lattice object, and in the shape key section, let's tab out of the lattice object. We'll need to be in the object mode, and let's create the first one. That'll be the base, and let's immediately create another one, and we'll modify the shape here. So tab into the edit mode. So let's select these control points and just create a tilt like this, a little bit protruded, to the side. So now if you tab out, this will jump back, but if you modify this value here, you can animate it using this value right there. So that's what we are going to use. Now I want another one right here, the key 2. There will be like a crouching animation, so we'll move this down a little bit, and this as well. Maybe we can leave this up a little bit so it's like a body is only crouching, so it will move like this. And now we can add another one. Tab into the edit mode, and let's do the same thing only to the other side, a little bit of the tilt and jump to the side like this. So we'll get something like this here. And now we'll create the keyframes, and we'll need to keyframe every one of these values at every step. So on the frame 1, let's increase the key 1 to 1. And then hovering over these values, we'll press I to insert keyframes, but don't forget to insert them on all 3. And now scrap 10 frames, and we'll reduce this to 0. Press I, and then increase this to 1, and press I again. And don't forget to press I here as well. You want all of these to be yellow at every frame. And now let's go to frame 20, and let's increase this to 1. And reduce this one to 0, and again we'll insert keyframe on all of these, and then we can just select this keyframe right here on the frame 10, press Shift D and duplicate it right here, and select the first one and duplicate it right here. So I think it will be 40 frames in the end, not 60. So let's play it back, and I think this looks quite fine for a start. We have some wiggle movement, but I want to have repeated movement. So for a second here, let's set it to 40 frames, and we'll play with the length of the animation a little bit later. And now let's refine the movement. So let's expand this even more a little bit, and now hover over the timeline and press Ctrl Tab to switch to the graph editor. And let's press A to select all and period on the numpad, you know, the dot to focus our view on the whole animation. And basically here we have one track for each of these values of the shape keys and the way they are animated from 0 to 1. And we can modify this curve, you know, to smoothen out the motion, you know, to make it more snappy or more slow somewhere, you know, whatever we need. And I want this animation to be more snappy at frame 10 and frame 30 because that's, you know, the crouching position. So we can just select this keyframe right here and scale down the handles right here, so it will happen more quickly here. And at the same time we can do the same at the bottom keyframe that's on the 0 here, so the jump will start a little bit sooner. So make sure you select this curve right here and press S to make this more snappy down here. And now we can make these a little bit more eased out like this, and let's play back our animation. You can see now the animation is a little bit more snappy at the crouch and a little bit protruded on those extremes on the sides, which is exactly what I wanted. So that's basically the animation. So let's now look from the camera by pressing 0 on a numpad, and you can see the camera is a little bit too low, so let's select it here in the viewport, press G then Z and move it up like this. And now we can press G then Z twice to move it away, and let's change the resolution to something like 1600 to 1200, so it's 4:3 ratio, or you can leave it full HD, however you want it. And now with the cursor still in the middle, let's press Shift A and we'll add a plane, tap into the edit mode and scale it up so we create a background like this. Let's collapse this part right here and let's hit Ctrl Tab hovering over here so we get the timeline back. And now let's go to the frame 1, select the camera, and let's press I and insert location keyframe. And now in the timeline, press Shift D and move it all the way here. And now we'll create some in-between keyframes. So let's enable auto keying, go to the frame 10 and press G and hold Shift for a very small increment, and let's just move camera very slightly. And now I'll do the same on the frame 20 to the other side, and on the frame 30 as well a little bit. And now let's disable the auto keying. That's very important, make sure you do that. So now we have a little bit of that camera wiggle movement that's not so visible right now because we have the gray background, but I will add some objects in the background probably later, so that will help, you know, with a little bit of that handheld, you know, feeling. So we now have our camera, but I can see right here it goes too much high up, so I would like to have camera a little bit higher up. But right now, as we already have the keyframes in place, we can't just move this in the viewport, so we'll press Ctrl Tab here and locate our Z location, disable everything else, enable only Z location, press A and press G then Y here, so we are able to move basically the keyframe position in the graph editor. So we can now press Ctrl Tab to tap back out to the timeline, and let's collapse this and let's handle, you know, some materials and some lighting. So in the render settings, I will enable ambient occlusion, bloom and screen space reflections with refraction in case we need it. And now I will switch to cycles, that's what I will use for the final render, and enable some denoising and optics for the final denoise because the open image keeps crashing on me. And let's reduce this to something really low, like, you know, 64 samples for the preview animation. And now we are able to preview this in cycles, but we'll need some light in place. So let's press Shift A and we'll add a light. Let's select area light and press G then Z and move this up, make it a little bit larger like this, and switch to disk, and something like 500 should be okay. Now we can hold Z and preview this rendered, and additionally press Ctrl B and limit our render preview only for the camera bounce. So we have something like this in place. We can additionally move this a little bit back, and I want to have some backlight here as well. So first of all, let's rotate those two objects like this, so I want to look more from the front. And now let's duplicate this with Shift D, press Z to move this down, and G then Shift Z to move it a little bit back. So this will serve as a little bit of a backlight on the plant, as well as a little bit of a background lighting. So let's increase this to something like 1000 and move it even more back, like this. And now we can create even more rim light using some spotlight. So let's press Shift A and we'll go light and spot, press G, then Z, move it up, but make sure you hold period on the keyboard and switch pivot point to 3D cursor, and then press R twice to enable trackball rotation and rotate it towards the back like this, even more, just like that, and press G then Z and move it up. And it should basically only, you know, catch the flower from the back. So we can now increase this to something really strong like 5000 and move it around, maybe bring it a little bit closer and increase the radius so it doesn't create sharp shadows, and maybe even something like 10K will be fine here. And you can see the rim light happening right there, and yeah, I think this will be fine. So let's create some materials, and first I will select the background and create the background material. Now a little bit of a blue color there, and now let's select this base and create brown, almost red brownish material, and let's increase the roughness all the way to 1. And now we can create a new material slot because this is two objects joined in one. So tab into the edit mode and let's select something on the top base, press L to select linked, and now let's hit assign. So we have this new material slot assigned, so we can tab out, create a new material there and move it towards the green color and increase the roughness here as well. And now set the same material to the other parts of the plant. And now here in the middle I want to have white material here, so let's move this all the way. And now select the eyes, they'll be black with some gloss here, so let's reduce the roughness to something like 0.1 so you can see those reflections. And now select the rings, and first of all let's create a new material, and we'll create the red material first, something like this, but let's reduce the roughness so it's a little bit more glossy. And now let's create a new material slot, tab into the edit mode, and again we'll select something on the inner circle, press L for linked and hit assign, tab out and create a new material there, and they'll be yellow of course, and this doesn't have to be so glossy, something like this. And now we can color the light here in the background so we get some more of that colored lighting there. And in the world color we can increase this, increase the lightness and add some, you know, blue tones to blend this a little bit better together. And now in the render settings, scroll down to color management, and we can increase the contrast here to something like medium high and increase the exposure if needed. And don't forget to check the motion blur. And now in the output settings, let's switch the PNG to FFmpeg. Let's choose our folder right here, and then let's go for encoding, and as container I tend to use MP4. Now go render animation, wait out your frames, and you should have your animation good to go. So that's it for today's animation. I really hope you enjoyed this one, and again, if you did, please leave that like, and if you're new around here, please hit that subscribe. Thank you all for watching and have a wonderful day.